Yes, it's weird, or yes, we should go. Let's have a look. We are live. You can go. Okay, brilliant stuff. Right, so welcome to this evening's tasting. This is going to be a very weird experience for me in many ways. I'm really sorry that there's apparently some kind of ping and or noise. I've tried my best to stop being annoying, but Dirk has informed me that I am still a little annoying. Hopefully you guys can live with it. If not, you've got all the whiskies, so, just plow on through. Most of you guys are probably seasoned drinkers. I imagine everybody's bought a pack has had many drams. No, I'm actually live now. So bye. Okay. So that's my wife. If you get any inappropriate comments, Dirk, it was from her. Bye. So this is a strange experience for many reasons. One, it's staring at a picture of myself. Don't like that, makes me feel very uncomfortable. Two, the only person I'm actually communicating with is Dirk, which is great. I mean, he's a lovely guy, so I have no problem with that particularly. And lastly, we're doing this tasting in my bedroom. It's the first time I've done a whiskey tasting in my bedroom, though there's always been a lot of whiskey in this room. So, my name is Oliver Chilton. For those who don't know, I look after all of the cask selection and drinking at Elixir Distillers. That is not to say that other people at Elixir Distillers don't drink. In fact, it's within your contract that you have to. But largely it's my job to make sure what we drink is of a reasonable quality. Hopefully you guys have all received your packs. I did. And I've got some lovely whiskies to try. Thank you very much to the guys at Whiskybase for putting this on and for sorting out all the packs and sending all the whiskies. We're going to be trying whiskies from across our portfolio and the different ranges that we bottle. Bit of information just to start about us. So Elixir Distillers is the kind of independent bottling arm of the Whisky Exchange or Specialty Drinks in the UK, which is a really big retail shop run by Sukhinder Singh. We're essentially a hobby business. So essentially my boss is one of the biggest collectors, whiskey hobbyists in the world. And we are a great big extension of that hobby, where a man went from collecting miniatures to eventually collecting casks of whiskey. And we look after those casks, manage those casks, and make sure that everything that we put into a bottle tastes nice. We bottle quite a lot of whiskey a year, and in several ranges. Our first ever range was Single Malts of Scotland, which 4 of the whiskies we're going to try tonight are in that range. We've kind of been playing around with repackaging and talking about the whiskies in different ways, being completely frank with you, and you guys can ask as many questions as you like. Marketing is not my thing. Labels, packaging, I hate boxes. I hate them. So I'm all about liquid. Ask whatever questions you like about liquid. If it's about how we present ourselves, ask away. I'll give you an honest answer, and later on someone will tell me off. So, not wanting to linger too much on us, although if there are questions, please ask. First whiskey. So the first whiskey we're going to try, which I'll just put up a picture of, is... Worked so well earlier. Is a Linkwood. It's in our new range in Single Malts of Scotland. So Sukhinder started bottling Single Malts of Scotland in 2002. And essentially it was his home for single casks that he was buying at the time that he thought was really nice. The label's gone through lots of changes over the years, and we used to bottle single casks, then we bottled small batches, then we went back to single casks, mainly because I was a bit scared of bottling small batches. And then last year we decided to launch a range called Reserve Casks, where we could put kind of batches of 4 or 5 or 6 casks at a time together. Normally younger age statements, so between kind of 8 and 12 years old, and bottled at 48%. The reason 48% is very simple. I like drinking it. It's it's a nice strength to drink at. I can bring this back up if anyone wants to see it again, but hopefully you've tuned in to see my lovely face as much as hearing my lovely voice. The whiskey we're trying at the moment is a Linkwood. We buy parcel whiskey from all across Scotland. So we're sitting on coming up to about 10,000 casks, ranging from 0 to 60 years of age. For reserve casks, we're particularly looking at parcels of whiskey where we've got a little bit more quantity. We tend to, for all single malts of Scotland releases, we tend to look for whiskies that are following the distillery character. So in the case of this particular Linkwood, it is quite fresh, quite zesty, quite appley. There are some kind of more slightly more chocolatey notes in there as well. I think for me, these kind of whiskies are great kind of session whiskies. These are the things that you can drink and drink and drink and drink. In fact, just this morning, I got a message from a friend of mine, saying it's your fault that I was awake till 3 a.m. because I drank this bottle. Now, I'm not obviously advising you to do that. There are lots of rules in lots of different countries over how you drink. My general rule of thumb is it's easiest to drink out of a pint glass. However, tonight we've got these lovely little glasses from Whiskybase, which tell you that you got 2 cl in, which, as I said to Dirk, is a perfectly reasonable amount of whiskey to have in a glass. Okay, so please try it. I'm figuring that everyone who buys from Whiskybase is somewhat of a whiskey geek or whiskey nerd, so I don't really need to talk to you about how you taste. Though if anyone wants pointers, you put it in your mouth. That tends to work for me. In terms of kind of tasting notes, I mean, I can read them from the spreadsheet if you like. I can tell you what I'm tasting. I also think that's somewhat of a nonsense. It's such a personal thing. Tasting notes largely are all to do with how you remember flavors. So a lot of what I talk about relates to how I grew up and the foods that I ate. So don't necessarily transport across the world. But I think in terms of kind of general stuff, on the nose it is quite citrus led. It's quite zesty. And then on the palate, I always find Linkwood to be quite fresh and quite clean. All the casks we used for this were refill American oak. That simply means that they were used for something before they were used for aging this whiskey. Because of the source, so it's a Diageo malt. It's owned by the biggest drinks company in all the world. And all of the casks were provided by Diageo. We bought the whiskey when it was, I think, 10 years old or 11 years old. So we haven't been holding on to it for that long. Some whiskies we hold on for a lot longer, and I'll come to that a bit later on. A lot of the wood that you get from Diageo is it's normally what they call refill. You have no idea how old it is until you go up and have a look at it. Something I'll show you a bit later. The wood for this mainly seemed to be in the region of about 20, 25 years old. It probably held grain at some point, which was used for blending. It probably held some other kind of malt. And it made for quite a light whiskey. I mean, you guys should all have samples, so you'll be looking at it. And it's quite a light colour. We don't add any colouring. You'll kind of get that by looking at all the samples. Now, the great thing about refill casks is it allows for distillery character to come through. Obviously, sometimes it's really nice to have deep, rich, dark, heavy whiskies, which you need fresher wood for. And some makes lend themselves better than others. Linkwood being quite a fresh, clean make, for me it works quite well in refill wood. All right, so Dirk, any questions so far? Now, apparently there's a delay, so I don't know how long to wait before I move on to things. Dun. Billy wants to see the slide. Okay, there you go. I know which Billy. Yeah. Hello, Billy Abbott. all these slides were put together by my lovely marketing person, which all look lovely. I'd never seen them before today. All the artwork is done in-house, so it's all drawn by our designer Raj. He loves sketching distilleries so much because we send him so many to do. As I said, I love this Linkwood. I think it's lovely, fresh, kind of clean whiskey, and I think that's exactly what it should say there. I mean, I don't get any particular peat. There's maybe a little bit of smoke to it. I mean, there's a few things that could be. It could be wood, so it could just be that you're using wood that's been slightly charred, or it could be a cask that previously held Caol Ila. For me, I don't get that. I get a slightly more tannic, almost tea-like herbaceous note to it, which I guess you could say was smoky. I don't know if anyone else gets anything similar to that. I also get kind of a richness to it, a slight sweetness to it as well. One of the things you do find, certainly when you're buying these casks, is you get a big list, right? And they won't give you, a lot of distilleries won't give you any information. So when you rock up at the distillery, you sometimes find bits of information that you've never ever thought you'd see before. Now, I don't know if this is going to work, but I have a picture of a cask that I wanted to throw in here. No, it might go horribly wrong. You might see a blank screen. Don't worry, bear with me. Image, browse, desktop. Bear with me, guys. I should have done this earlier. It's going to be great, I hope. This is one of my favourite pictures, and it's completely the wrong way around, so I'm sorry about that. And it's too big, so I will make it smaller. You know, you've got to learn as you go, I guess. You're going to have to look at this the wrong way around because I have no idea how to flip it. Okay, so this... that's me. So this up here is a cask of Caol Ila, and when we bought this cask, it just said refill cask on it. And if you look at it sideways, it says Gonzalez and Bias. It's one of my favourite casks I've ever found. Okay, so buying casks. There's lots of ways you can buy casks. Sometimes it's as simple as a guy bought a cask as an investment or as fun for, themselves essentially, to invest in with friends and then bottle up later on. Certainly, I know quite a few people who do that. And they'll phone up, say, the Whisky Exchange, or they'll phone up us directly at Elixir Distillers and say, I've got this cask, don't really know what to do with it. Would you like to buy it? And if it's good, we will. Honestly, those are the kind of rarer occurrences and doesn't happen that often. A lot of cask purchasing happens through kind of a brokerage market. That brokerage market has existed for hundreds of years, and it essentially is based around blending. So largely, it's a process around distilleries who don't speak to each other. Some do, some don't. Needing stock from other distilleries, or maybe there's a complicated deal going on. And what happens is there's a guy in the middle, a broker, and he brokers the deal. Now, largely what now happens, or has happened for many, many years, there's kind of offshoots, parcels from that, which don't have a home. And the brokers go out to people like ourselves and say, well, I've got 10 casks of this, 20 casks of that, would you be interested? With some of that, you get samples, some of it you don't, and it kind of depends who you're buying from and how much you're buying. The last kind of way is buying direct from distillers, which some companies do. Sometimes distillers have excess stock, which they need to get rid of to make money. And they'll offer that to you. And again, sometimes there's samples and sometimes there aren't. Largely the way I purchase, I buy a lot of stuff with either just representative samples of a parcel. So I'm buying like 100 casks or 200 casks. or without a sample at all, based on my understanding of the make, the vintage, and the kind of wood, as we're told about it. If I don't know the make, or if the make's not one that I'm particularly keen on, I'll always ask for samples. If it's something like Clynelish, which we'll taste in a minute, then frankly samples seem somewhat irrelevant up until the point we're going to bottle it. When it comes to buying kind of these larger parcels and breaking them down, that's really what our job really is. It's the management of those. So our job really comes down to buying large parcels of casks and then managing those to get the best casks out of those, or to recask any stuff that doesn't taste great, or sell on anything that's not salvageable, or blend it away. I should stress at this point, and one of my favourite ever accusations, we'll call it, at shows, is that we're left with the casks that distillers don't want. In some ways, that's absolutely true. In some ways, it's utter rubbish. It kind of builds in this idea that distillers are trying every single cask they sit on, which is nonsense. I mean, most distillery companies are sitting on hundreds of thousands of casks. Now, they may well be trying lots of casks for their batches, for their small batches and single cask projects, and I'm sure they spend a lot of care and attention. You'll see in the background, I buy lots of bottlings from distilleries. I have done for the last 15, 16 years. But a lot of these casks are never tasted. They're destined for projects that maybe don't come around. Bear in mind that the Scotch whisky business is all based around guessing what's going to happen in 5 years' time or 10 years' time. Oh, there's a question. It's probably to say, mate, move on, drink some more. Ooh. No question at the moment, just typing. Good. So, yeah, going back to that. So what you'll end up with is, the example I always give, maybe a blending company comes up with a blending project. They rack up all the casks for it, and the plan is to release this product in 5 years' time. And then maybe the marketing department change their mind and say, right, well, this product will no longer work. We no longer want it for whatever reason. It might be that they all thought that this particular blend was going to be a really big deal in China, and now they're all buying single malt. It's a pretty accurate description of a lot of what's gone on in the last 5 years. They then have all these parcels of whiskey that they don't need anymore, and they've got pressure to bring money in, so they sell them off. And that's where we come in. We basically live off the barnacles on the bottom of their boat, and tasty barnacles they are indeed. I hope that's covered all the questions on buying, but if there are any more questions specifically about that, please do ask. I do ramble a lot, by the way, so please forgive me for that. If you're like me and you've drunk the first whiskey and you're thinking, I'm a little bit thirsty, I'll tell you a little bit about that, and then if there's more questions, we can go on to those. Right, so hopefully this now works. Clynelish. This is, we've got it down as a Clynelish 8-year-old distilled 2011. On my sample it says distilled 2010. Both things are true. And it's kind of a funny one. So I do occasionally do projects for other companies using our cask stock. And we took a couple of casks of 2010 Clynelish. We took them out of cask and put them into drum to bottle for somebody. They then sat there for about 6 months while the company messed around, and in the end they decided they didn't want them. So in the end what we decided to do was blend them with a couple of other casks from 2011. These were all first fill barrels of Clynelish. We got very lucky buying this parcel of whiskey. It's one of the best parcels I've ever purchased. Every cask I've had from it has been absolutely dynamite. In terms of style, it's pretty classic for Clynelish. You've got that kind of rich honeycomb. You've got that rich texture, kind of beeswaxy texture. There's really more kind of thicker feel to it. Again, it's bottled at 48%. It's part of our reserve cask range. You'll see on all the bottles of reserve casks, it has a parcel number, and that's basically the release. So this is from parcel number 2. We did a release end of last year. It was far more popular than we thought. Sold out too quickly. So we've moved on to parcel 2. We've already done parcel 3. And each parcel will contain different whiskies from different regions and different styles. We are kind of basing it around region, even though I largely think that's nonsense. So this is kind of our Highland release from Clynelish. And hopefully, as you're trying it, you'll get those richer Clynelish notes. You'll also get that kind of fact that it's first fill bourbon, but not over the top because it's still quite young. Some of the whiskey is 8 years old, hence the 8 statement on it. Some of the whiskey is actually 9 years old, just coming up to 10. So it's kind of a mixture of 8, 9, and almost 10-year-old whiskies. And going back to the buying side, this is an example of just kind of getting lucky. We were doing a deal on a couple of makes, not as interesting, but really lovely whiskies nonetheless. And on the side, I asked for basically, is there anything you can do? Is there anything else you've got that you're not needing at the moment? He goes, well, I've got this Clynelish. Would that be of interest? And I said, without even thinking about it, I said, yes, I will take all of that, please. And ever since then, I've never been able to find another cask. So we will now sit on this and manage it for hopefully the rest of my lifetime. I think it's rather lovely, that. And I think it's just ridiculously drinkable, dangerously drinkable. I'm kind of annoyed at myself for not sending a bottle home to drink. Oh, a question, maybe. People like it. That's good. I like it too. Great stuff. Oh, wow. I like wow. That's good. That is largely my tasting notes for a lot of things. It's not as helpful for writing these kind of presentations, but certainly probably a more accurate description of what things taste like. I find all of this quite odd. You know, you telling people what you do is weird anyway at the best of times. But when it comes down to tasting whiskey and saying what tastes good, I should stress now, my only qualification for doing my job is the fact that I'm able to say wow around the same time as Secunda. That's pretty much it. I just like whiskey quite a lot, and someone likes the same whiskey as me. Right, so I'll leave this slide up a little bit longer, I think we're more or less finished, right? Apart from if anyone noticed the typo in it, which is now making me laugh. Why did we bring it down to 48%? So there's a few reasons for that. One, I have an obsession with the idea of introducing more people to independent bottling. So this is kind of probably the wrong crowd for Whiskybase. You guys love independent bottlings and buy many of them. I come from a shop background, right? So I've worked in whiskey shops for 15, 16 years. And as I said, I love distillery bottlings, but I love independent bottling because I think it's a fantastic way of finding new whiskey. One of the problems, however, with selling single cask, high strength whiskey to people is if you get them back into the shop, they come back in and they go, I really like that. Can I have it again? And you go as a guy in the shop, no, we don't do that. The other problem you have is it's quite often the strengths are so high for people who don't know about adding water to whiskey. Maybe they won't add water and they'll find it too strong. So with reserve casks, I always saw it as a way of introducing people to single cask whiskey or to independent bottled whiskey and to get them to buy it again and again, to make it more kind of regular drinking for them as almost a gateway drug, to get them into buying single cask stuff from everybody. And I should stress this, I don't mean just from Elixir Distillers. I'd love it if everyone bought our stuff all the time, but frankly we don't have enough casks. And I buy far too much whiskey from other independent bottlers to think that would be a good idea. So for me, what this is, bringing it down to 48% makes it very palatable, it makes it very drinkable, and it means it's something that I can get more and more people into. The other thing that's quite funny with strength reduction is when you reduce strength, even if you do it on the next whiskey, which is 51.1, add a little bit of water to it, you tend to make whiskies a bit sweeter, just the way in which the compounds work, which tends to make them more appealing to a lot of people. In terms of the actual strength of 48%, very simple. I like it. I would love to give you a better reason for that, but I like the strength of 48%. I feel it drinks very, very well. A lot of the time when I'm reducing whiskies in the office, I'll reduce them by 1 or 2%. I feel that makes a difference. But when it comes to just wanting whiskies to sit back and drink quite a lot of, I find sub 50 and around that 48%, it allows you to still be non-chill filtered and not add colouring or any of that nonsense. It still allows you the texture you get from slightly higher alcohol, but it just makes things a little bit more palatable. I hope that answered the question without sounding too knobby. Who was a character in a TV programme over here? I hope that joke came through. Not really. I should warn everybody, I meant to do this at the beginning. It is now 7 o'clock. There is a good chance my son, who is 3 years old, will run through the doors over there in a minute, scream at us, and then come talk to you about Lagavulin. He's relatively knowledgeable for a 3.5-year-old. But if that happens, don't worry. I'm not being kidnapped or anything. It's just my son. This is very, very drinkable. I got sent these pipettes. Feel free to add a bit more water. Obviously, I chose the strength of 48%, so I'm quite happy with it at that. And I should stress, like, going on to the next whiskey, a lot of the whiskies you'll find from Elixir Distillers, we do water reduction. You will very rarely see cask strength written on the label, mainly because some whiskies we reduce by 1 or 2%, and we do that purely because when I'm tasting in the office, I'll be thinking about how do I want someone to open that bottle and taste it. And it drives me insane when you find a great cask of whiskey that tastes great with like 2% reduction, but if you bottle it at cask strength, people go, nah, it's not great. That's just annoying to me. So I'd rather always present whiskies as I see them at their best. And I kind of feel like that's our job. Any more questions on that, Dirk? Are we all good? Now, I realise I'm going to put the rest of my Clynelish over here because I don't know about you guys. I'm very happy about this. It means I can save that Clynelish for later. Less happy about the fact that this broke a little bit in transit. So I lost a little bit of liquid, but it's all right. I've got a whole bottle, so I'll be fine. I'm going to move on to the next one, which is part of our, we'll call it our single cask series because I think that is the new name for it. And that is a Glenburgie. Glenburgie 1998. So when I moved over to head office from our shop in London, I was given many jobs. Most of them had nothing to do with bottling whiskey, and most of them were to do with running events and talking about whiskey. After somehow conning my way onto a trip to select casks from Signatory, I ended up looking after Single Malts of Scotland. Now, Single Malts of Scotland at the time was in black labels, and we used to bottle a mixture of small batches of like 3 or 4 casks at 46%, or single casks at cask strength. And being completely frank with you, my only blending experience up until that point was making the whiskey for my wedding, which I did with Compass Box, which was fantastic, but frankly did not set me up for a career in blending, although I still use a lot of the same stuff that Greg Glass told me. For that reason, knowing that I liked whiskey a lot and felt pretty confident that I could say, that one tastes nice, I moved all Single Malts of Scotland back to single casks. So the reason our labels look the way they do now is mainly because I hated the black ones. I couldn't read them. My eyesight is appalling, hence the reason I'm wearing glasses. I found that both Sukhinder and I are essentially toddlers at heart. We like pictures, so all our labels now have pictures on. And I wanted to put all the cask details. So on each of our labels for the single casks, they have a little grid system on them, which has most of the details that you think you need, including cask number, etc. Cask number is particularly important with these Glenburgies because we bought a big parcel of them and we're bottling them pretty frequently. And a lot of the cask numbers pretty much look the same. So you do bear that in mind when you're buying these bottles. Similar to the conversation before about buying casks, I kind of found this parcel quite interesting because, as I said, a lot of the time you don't necessarily get to try the whiskies before you buy them if you're buying a big parcel of whiskey. I didn't know Glenburgie that well when we were buying this parcel. We bought it probably about 4 or 5 years ago. I'd had a few bottlings over the years from Douglas Lang, and I think AJ Rattery as well, but I hadn't tasted that many Glenburgies. I was having a conversation with a really good friend of mine at Shivers Brothers, Ian Logan, about the 50cl series. This is kind of in that series. I don't know if you can actually see that, but I'm taking you can. Which I used to love. I thought it was a really good series of whiskies, and we used to sell through the Whiskey Exchange. And Ian Logan said to me they were discontinuing them, and we sadly wouldn't be able to buy them anymore. And I asked him at the time, so out of interest, what's your favourite make? Which distillery for you is the one that's the kind of unsung hero? And he said Glenburgie. Just happened that same week, I was having a conversation with a blender who basically they discontinued their age range, and they were getting rid of some aged stock they used to use in their aged blend. And they asked if I wanted it, and they said it's a mixture of Glenburgie and Lecheck. And I already loved Lecheck, so we bought that. And the Glenburgie, on the basis that Ian Logan said, I've never had a bad cask, it's really, really good, we bought everything. So a bit of a punt. And so far, every cask we've had has been this beautiful kind of sometimes tropical fruit, but some more or less this kind of citrus, kind of bright, fruity whiskies. There's a mixture of different woods in the parcel we bought. Some of them were lying at one warehouse owned by one distillery, and the rest were lying at, I think it was Diageo warehouse. And there is a difference in that stock. There's a difference in the wood. So they were obviously filled by different people. The wood was provided by different people. And it's really interesting to go through them. What I found is it's not really a case of recasking any of these. It's more of a case of leaving them. So some of the casks we bottled at 18 years old, some we're leaving them, and I've got kind of pegged to retaste when they're about 25. And again, that's largely our job, is to go through them and say, okay, well, these casks will probably last a lot longer than others. This was a relatively low strength cask. In the end, came out 51.1. Can't remember if we added water. I don't think we did, because it was quite low for a lot of these Glenburgies anyway. A lot of them were coming out of cask about 48%. Anyway, I filled my second glass full of Glenburgie. I'll go back to the picture of me so you guys can see me drinking it. So you know I'm not faking, I'm drinking along with you. Every dram you have, I will have one too. I even have beer set up afterwards. So if you want to join me in a pub, we can set one of those up and just go for it. Wow. For me, like, I get kind of a proper, almost pear droppy thing. And it definitely tastes kind of brighter and fuller than that 51.1. I don't know if there's any opinions out there. Very herbaceous, I would agree. Definitely herbaceous. I think that's a mixture of kind of old wood, because it is reefer wood. But also you've got that kind of, that spirit character coming through as well. I'm not sure if these tasting notes are for the right cask, if I'm completely honest. There you go. Glass of American IPA, yeah, they probably are. That sounds about right. Got that slightly hoppy thing going on. I do love these casks, and it's one of my favourite things each year is pulling like 3 or 4 samples. And that's essentially what we do. So what we'll have is, out of 200 casks, we'll literally pick at random 5 cask samples or 10 cask samples. And they charge you a hideous sum of money for every cask sample you draw of a whiskey that you already own. So I jealously guard those. Currently jealously guarding them in my house. We've got lots of messages. So if anyone comes to my house at the moment, there's something like 300 samples sitting around that all need to be tasted at some point. So anyone wants to come to, I reckon when lockdown's done, I am here ready to drink with you. So one thing that I'm quite keen on for the single cask series that we do now is to keep them reasonably priced, while at the same time as kind of going for slightly older whiskies. We do bottle a few younger things, like where we find really exceptional casks. The cask I showed you earlier, the Caol Ila, that was... I'll actually go back to that image because I think it's worth having a look at. This cask here, this was a Caol Ila that was actually destined for Askaig. It was destined to go in 100 proof. When we do a vatting of 100 proof, we actually pull about 50 casks across. The reason we do that is I am cheap. Basically, my family's from Yorkshire, and we know how to save money. They charge you, roughly speaking, about £35 to £50 per sample. So if you're doing like 100 samples of something for a batch of Askaig, your problem is it costs you a fortune. So it's cheaper just to fly up to the bottling hall, move 50 or 60 casks, taste every single one, and then pull out any that don't work. I've learned over time that 50 casks, roughly speaking, fits a wagon, so that kind of saves us a bit of money there. And two, I can try about 50 casks of whiskey in about an hour and a half without falling over. Any more than that, it gets a little bit hairy, and it's concrete floors, so it hurts a lot if you do fall over. This cask in particular was interesting because on the paperwork it said hogshead, refill hogshead. So we thought it was American oak. But when we got to the bottling hall, we found out it was a little bit longer. It was a slightly different shape. So we pulled it out, we scraped some of the paint off, and as you can see, it says Gonzalez and Bias. And after a little bit of research a little later, what I discovered was that at one point, Diageo were buying what they called half butts, their term, not an official term, and they were casks used by Gonzalez Bias for in Solera systems, but at the top of the Solera, and they were buying them essentially on the cheap. The cooperages hated them because they were slightly too long, and they were using them and then reusing them several times. So the whiskey in that cask was a Caol Ila, which it works because we're going to go on to Caol Ila in a minute. And it was darker than all the rest. It was slightly richer than all the rest. And because it was very, very good, I removed the cask from the vat. I put it to one side and I marked it for bottling for single malts of Scotland at a later date. Everything else that we had was an American oak and went into our batch for 100 proof, mainly because it fitted the profile 100 proof, which I might talk about a bit later when we go on to Askaig, but probably not as interesting for this tasting. For the single cask series we do now, we have these occasional odds where we get younger whiskies that are just very, very good and we want to bottle. And then what we try and do is bottle kind of 15, 16 and above, up to about 30 years of age in our single cask packaging. Above that, we have a packaging called Director's Special. Sadly, we don't have any on tonight, but if you look them up, they're all great expensive. And those are all casks that Sekinder tastes. My job is basically to try everything. Sekinder just tries the good stuff. I guess that's the privilege of owning the business. Anyway, so that kind of brings us nicely on, I think, to our next whiskey. Any questions on the Glenburgie, apart from the fact that it's really herbaceous, which I 100% agree with. I might actually change my tasting note and put that in there. No, good, brilliant. So, oh, no, there is a question. Boris agrees to the IPA note. Which Boris? We can move on. Thank you, Dave. Grand. Okay, so Caol Ila. This is also from our next batch of reserve casks. I like the number of casks 45. That is not true. It is 5 hogsheads. 5 hogsheads. Should have proofed this presentation. So this is 5 hoggies of Caol Ila, 10 years old, from 2009. We buy lots of Caol Ila. There are very good reasons for that. One, we bought Askaig, which I'm not sure whether you know this or not, but you probably do. 100 proof and 8-year-old, which are kind of core bottlings, are all made from Caol Ila. So for that, I buy Caol Ila as new make. I buy it as 3-year-old. I buy it as 7-year-old. I buy it as 10-year-old. You name it, I buy it. Lots and lots of Caol Ila. It is also my favourite make to work with. That is not to say it's my favourite make. It is just my favourite make to work with because it is consistent. It tastes great, young and or old. One of my favourite periods of time for any distillery is Caol Ila from 1979 to 1984. I think that stock is just magical. It's been bottled by Signatory, by Duncan Taylor, by Berry Brothers and Rudd. You name it, they bottled it. Cadenhead's still bottling 80s Caol Ila. We're still bottling 80s Caol Ila. And I genuinely think if you see something, buy it, because it'll be among one of the best whiskies you ever try. But young is also amazing. One of my favourite things I have in the office is some new make from 2011, which I've kept because I can now compare it to the casks we got from 2011, which we'll actually be tasting in a minute. And it's one of the most drinkable things in the world. It's so kind of citrus driven, but peaty. And that all comes down to the fact that Caol Ila's got these big stills. They fill quite low, creating extra reflux, making for a much lighter make, much fresher, lighter make, even though the phenol content, the phenols in the barley, is essentially the same, if not slightly higher than Lagavulin. So although the start of the production is the same as Lagavulin, the end product is completely different and much fresher, much cleaner. I have a long-held belief that if an independent bottler ever bottles a bad cask of Caol Ila, they should basically have all their casks taken away, preferably given to me, but all their casks taken away, because it must be something they did wrong, as the distillery has basically produced nothing but excellent spirit for certainly since the 70s. And largely the stuff from the old distillery I've tried has been very good too. This particular batch of 5 casks, not 45 casks, of 10-year-old from 2009, this would have been brought across probably on one of our batches for Port Askaig 8-year-old. We use 8 and 9-year-old whiskey. I pulled them out because they were nicer casks. And I thought, that's a nice little batch. We'll put it together and bottle it under reserve casks. For me, bottling at that slightly higher strength, 48%, again, gives you slightly more kind of white pepper, that slightly more spicy, peppery note that you sometimes get out of Caol Ila, while still being kind of a citrus-led whiskey. It's also quite full-flavoured, given that alcohol 48%. You get quite a lot on the palate. It's quite rich, quite full. Grand. Any questions on this? We're going to try... Well, actually, we're going to try something in between Caol Ila. We'll try another Caol Ila in a minute anyway. Do we lift our price based on how good a cask turns out? That's a really good question. Yes and no is the answer. So I was actually having this conversation with someone internally today about pricing. It's a really complicated thing. So you've got the price of the cask, obviously, which if you pay too much for something, you've got to charge more for it. And it's that simple. Sometimes you're in the luxurious position where you can leave that cask for longer until it gets older or better and reflects the value that you paid for it. Sometimes when you bottle something, it's just excellent. Now, there's always a little bit of an argument internally between myself and Sukhinder, because I spend probably about 30% of my time looking at websites and bottles of whiskey to understand pricing. So a lot of our pricing take reserve casks is done on the cost price plus an amount of money that we need to make to allow us to buy more whiskey and pay staff and grow our business, which is what we hope to do. Some of the pricing on older stock is to do with the current market value, so what people are paying for that make and how much it's worth. And then every now and again, you try a cask and you go, you know what, that's just really, really, really good. And it deserves more money. I would love to live in a world where I sold everything for next to nothing and we all drank free whiskey. But sadly, that would not allow me to buy more whiskey, which is essentially my job, and I want to keep my job for as long as possible. Pays for my house and also for my obsession with buying whiskey. So the answer is yes, we definitely do look at the quality of a cask and go, that's very, very good. Where would it live? The best example I can give you is we had some casks of Linkwood that I was using for Elements of Islay. Now, I've been bottling Elements of Islay since 2013, doing batches for that. And a lot of the casks we use now for Elements of Islay are actually the same casks we were using 10 years ago. So like a lot of the casks of Linkwood are still the same 1996 or 1998 or 1999 stock that we were using back then. I was doing a batch in the office, and I've got a lovely, very clean, sterile white room to do all my blending and messing around in. It's not very romantic, but it worked. And Sukhinder came in, as he sometimes does, and he walked behind the desk, and he just picks up a glass of what I had on the table and tries it and says, "What's this?" And it says, Linkwood 1996. I'm looking at it for a batch of Elements of Islay. And he tastes it and he goes, "That's excellent. I want to bottle that as masterpiece." And he puts it down. Then he tried the cask next to it. He goes, "That's brilliant. I want that to be a director special." And then he walks out the room. Now, obviously, if I bottled those in a little 50 cl, mixed in with some 1998, it probably would have been cheaper. But the quality of the whiskey was such that Sukhinder loved it and wanted to bottle it in masterpiece and then director special. So yeah, the price in that case definitely reflects the quality of the whiskey. In some cases, it also just reflects how easy it is to sell something. The best example, and I'm being brutally honest even though I'm online, so please record this and send it to our marketing department so they can sack me later. But the best example is that we bottled a Caol Ila last year, so if you find it, it is one of my favourite whiskies ever that we bottled. We bottled it on the Single Malts of Scotland. It should probably have gone to Whisky Exchange for Sukhinder, but we hid it from him, mainly because I liked it a lot. And I can't remember how much we sold it for, but from a quality standpoint, it was a bargain. Like, frankly, if it had been £200-300, it would have been a bargain. It was excellent whiskey. It was fruit-driven. It was kind of classic in terms of style, and it was infinitely drinkable. But Caol Ila is not one of these makes which people are going mad for or chasing. It's not got loads of scores on Whisky Fun or Whiskybase, although it probably has it has a very good strong Whisky Fun now. So, ironically, even though it's an outstanding whiskey and it's probably worth a lot more money, if you just look at it purely quality, it would be very, very difficult to sell it at a very, very high price. So you look at it and you go, well, we sell it for what the market's prepared to pay for that make, that vintage, that style. And the people that buy it are frankly very, very lucky because they get something outstanding. And then it will get a score on Whisky Fun, which is my favourite avenue for marketing. And people will go crazy and buy like a case of it at a time. And frankly, each one of those people that buys that and drinks it is very lucky. Does that answer that question? I think it does. I've probably given far too much away there. Oh well. This Caol Ila's nicer. So we're on 7:22. I am almost an hour in. My God. I thought, how can you talk for an hour and a half? It's almost impossible. So I've got a message on the side from Billy saying that he's heckling me from the side, which is really reassuring. Right, so I am going to move on to our next whiskey, which I'm actually quite excited to talk about. Are there any more questions on Single Malts of Scotland or anything else? Because we're about to move to Islay whiskies. No? Good, brilliant. Lots of no questions. Okay, so the next whiskey we're going to try, as I said, I'm quite excited because I may have taken a bottle of this. Oh, there is a question. Right, we're just going to pour. I'm going to go for it anyway, and if there's a question, I'll answer afterwards. So we're going to try the Askaig 1997 bottle for Braz and Timmer for their 25th anniversary. basically, I'm excited to buy it. I've got a bottle of this unopened downstairs. I opened a bottle, obviously, when we bottled it, because I open a bottle of everything that we bottle to check it. It's important we check every bottle. And apart from that, the last time I tried it was actually at the 25th anniversary party. This is a Askaig bottling from Bunnahabhain. A lot of people think that all the Askaigs that we bottle come from Caol Ila. They don't. 100 proof and 8-year-old always come from Caol Ila. You'll find most of the whiskies come from Caol Ila. But when it comes to older whiskies or single casks, we use other distilleries. Askaig is a small village on the north coast of Islay. There is nothing there. There's a petrol station. There is a pub and a ferry terminal. I still never figured out where you pay for the petrol, so I probably owe them a fortune. When we started Askaig, the whole idea was to create, in the first instance, a cask strength or a high strength, so 100 proof, go to everyday dram. And Sukhinder loved the name, and he used Caol Ila as the base for that. It's always a single malt that we're bottling here, just for clarity's sake. When I took over Askaig, which was actually around 2014, we were running frighteningly low on Caol Ila. So I actually did a batch, which was our first 15-year-old of Lafroig, and I gave it to one of the guys in the office, and I said, look, what is it? What do you think of this? And he asked what it was. I said, Askaig 15. And he said, that's amazing. I didn't know we had any Caol Ila that age. It tastes great. And I figured we'd probably get away with just bottling it as Askaig, as long as whiskies were kind of sweet, they were fruity, they were elegant. As long as they fitted those things, we'd be fine. So the main thing I look for on any cask of whiskey that we're putting to Askaig is that it is smoky, mostly, but it's also approachable, it's elegant, and it's fruity. And as long as it fits those things, I don't care whether it comes from Bunnahabhain, whether it comes from Lafroig or Caol Ila, or wherever, really. In reality, I've never found a Bamor that really fits that brief, because it's always quite typical of the distillery. And I've tended to stick to mainly Bunnahabhain and Caol Ila for the makes that we've used. This particular cask is a thing of love for me, mainly because it is where I really screwed up for the first time. And I have screwed up many, many times in both my career and at home, as my wife will come in later and tell you. When I took over the kind of cask management, I need to stress there was no one else, right? So it wasn't like there was a massive team of people. We're still not a massive team of people at ED. I think we're now up to 9 people, which feels like a lot to me. In 2013, 2014, it was just myself working with Sukhinder and our designer. And when it came to cask management, I really didn't know very much. We bottled a batch of Lafroig LP4, LP3, and we used some sherry butts of Lafroig in that. And afterwards, Sukhinder said to me, you make sure you reuse those casks. They're really good casks. So I took some Bunnahabhain we had, which I felt was in refill wood, and it was okay, but not amazing, and I recast it. Later on, he phoned me up and said, is there any particular reason you're recasting quite old whiskey? And I went, well, I just thought it needed something. He went, yeah, okay. So normally, if you're going to use a cask for a lot longer, probably look at younger whiskey. Not something we always live by, but probably sensible advice. So this was kind of an accident. And what we did was we recast actually 4 hogsheads of Bunnahabhain, peated Bunnahabhain, 1997, into 2 sherry butts. And this is one of those sherry butts. The sherry butt previously held Lafroig. It was in those hoggies for 16 years, and then it's been in this sherry butt for kind of 4 or 5 years. I'm not exactly sure of the bottling dates and stuff, so I'll have to look into that if anyone's got any specific questions. As it turned out, when I pulled the sample, I thought it was outstanding. At that time, Hans and Alka were just about to celebrate their 25th anniversary, so the year before. He said, do you have anything really special? And I sent them this sample, which they both liked. And I was really happy to get a chance to share it for something that was quite important. Hans and Alka have been one of our importers since the very beginning. They've been looking after Sukhinder stuff for pretty much forever. So it's nice to be able to share this with them. In terms of the stock, the distiller, it's another one which is kind of interesting because it's Bunnahabhain. Bunnahabhain have been doing peated make, it seems to me, for quite a long time. But in the 90s, they just used to call it Bunnahabhain. They didn't differentiate. So we had a whole load of casks from 1997 that were Bunnahabhain unpeated and a whole load of casks that were Bunnahabhain peated. And there was honestly no way to know unless you picked up the sample and tasted it. We later on bought stock in 2001, which was peated Bunnahabhain called Margadale. And since then, we've been buying both Stoisha. I also have stock from Bunnahabhain called Ardnahoe, which is also peated. I honestly don't know all the ins and outs. My understanding from speaking to Andrew Brand, the distillery manager, is there are differences in terms of production, but I'm not sure even Ben Stewart or Distell have a full record of what they were doing at each period of time. Sometimes I think that's quite nice because it means you just have to enjoy the spirit for what it is. Anyway, guys, enjoy the whiskey. I hope you enjoy it as much as I do. It's that lovely kind of slightly, but you've got this salty, briny mineraliness to it as well, which isn't necessarily kind of peated Bunnahabhain. It's not something I necessarily think of. I think there's also a little bit of that ashy note that you'd think of as Laphroaig, maybe coming from the wood more than anything. And the sherry is very, very light because obviously it's refill. The butts, so we must have filled this Laphroaig in, I think, 2011 into these sherry butts. It was aged. It was distilled in 1998, aged till refilled in 2011, bottled in 2013, I think. And then we used these casks again, and then bottled this in 2018, I think, 2018, something like that. I've spoken for a long time, so either everyone's asleep or there are no questions. One of the two. Any question? No, good, brilliant. That, or Dirk has also fallen asleep and has decided he doesn't want to do any more questions. Not a... Oh, when is the other sherry butt? Bottled already or still in the warehouse somewhere? The other sherry butt was also bottled. Who did we bottle it for? I want to say we bottled it for Germany. I'm pretty sure we bottled it for Cash Imports. Because I did a couple of bottlings with them of sherry stuff. And one was from 2001 and one was from 1997. Which we probably did around a similar time. I basically got I got the car samples from that whole batch at the same time. They were all lying in the same warehouse. We also re-racked some Bruichladdich 1992 into barrels. That was a real screw up. It tasted amazing. And we bottled those as well. So I'm pretty sure it went to Germany. Though I'm pretty sure I have a bottle of that too. Just so we're clear, I don't keep bottles of everything we do. I tried that. I ran out of room really quickly. Grand. I'm going to try this with a bit of water because it is quite hot. From memory, I don't think we reduced it. So I'm going to add a little bit of water. I am glad to hear that we are relaxed. I was worried for a moment. So one of my promises to myself is that if lockdown finishes, I am definitely going back to the Netherlands this year. And possibly just to relax sometime in the autumn for a big event involving lots of people. Yeah, probably Whiskybase gathering. No problem. I'll definitely be there for that. Basically, I'm going to spend my entire year in the Netherlands, which makes a lot of sense. It's actually, it was by far my favourite market that I ever got to visit. Mainly because of the beer. Small beers, very tasty. And obviously also I'll make sure that I bring along Mark Watt, because that would be sensible. We're in the Netherlands together, didn't From Maltstock to the Gathering makes a lot of sense. Yes, we'll definitely do that. Grand. I wonder if there's a way we can share this so they can see what you're saying. Not everything, obviously. Not the bad stuff. Okay, so I don't want to drag on for like two hours, because if I do that, then one, you'll all leave. And I have no idea how many people are here either. So it may be just I'm talking to Dirk and 4 other people. We're going to move on to the next whiskey. If you've got a second glass like me, feel free to keep that one. And I will do. And hang on 1 second. And I'm going to move on to the element. The reason that all weird is I did something. Oh my good God! I'm going to move on to the element. The reason that all yeah, I shouldn't have told anyone. Oh my good God! I'm going to move on to the element. On the job stories. The reason that all yeah, I shouldn't have told anyone. Oh my good God! I'm going to move on to the element. The reason that all yeah, I shouldn't have told anyone. Oh my good God! I'm going to move on to the element. The reason that yeah, I shouldn't have told anyone. Oh my God! I'm really sorry, everybody. I'm sorry, being annoying. The reason that yeah, I shouldn't have told anyone. I'm my I'm really sorry, everybody. I'm sorry, being annoying. The reason that yeah, I shouldn't have told anyone. I'm my really sorry, everybody. I'm sorry, being annoying. Better? No echoes now. Okay, so on the job stories, yeah. So I don't travel as much as I used to. Not to that doesn't sound right, but I probably used to travel a lot more. Last time I was in the Netherlands was actually in well, no, that was the 25th anniversary of Bresenden, which I can't repeat anything from. So many illegal things happened. And various people from brands will be upset. Time before that was with Mark Watt in the Happy End. Probably shouldn't repeat that either, because that was a gay club. No. Funny stories we'll leave alone. Because they either involve drinking too much and or hurting myself. Okay, so next whiskey. There you go. Elements of Islay, CL12. So I was looking this up earlier because I realised on this sheet we put 2 sherry butts, distilled 2011, and I suddenly realised I had absolutely no memory of which sherry butts these were. So I looked it up and I realised this was part of the stock. I basically buy, I have an agreement with Diageo to buy a certain amount of Caol Ila every year, and I buy lots of it, of different vintages. And when we bought a load of 2011, when you buy from a company like Diageo, sometimes what you end up with is just a figure on a spreadsheet. It doesn't sound particularly romantic, and I'm all about destroying the romance of Scotch whisky. Basically, with a company like that, sometimes what you'll get is you just buy 4,000 litres of alcohol, per se. And then they transfer the casks to you. And you don't even know which kind of casks you're getting. Now, I've got a lovely lady at Diageo who looks after us. She's wonderful. She won't be listening tonight. And when she transferred our 2011 stock, she transferred some refill casks, but largely sherry butts. Now, that sounds fantastic. I'm sure you guys who all into single cask whiskey are going, what a fantastic mistake to happen. For me, it was a bit of a disaster because most of that stock was destined for Port Askaig, 100 proof or 8-year-old, which essentially we use refill American oak for. because these were sherry butts, it meant that I can't use them for my normal bottling. So I pulled samples to have a look at them. And then what I did was some of them were dark as the night. It was literally like looking back at yourself, actually, because you're reflecting your own character. And then some of them were much lighter. Some may well look like refill American oak. These two just were beautifully elegant refill sherry butts. There's nothing more I can really tell you about the wood apart from it was pretty old. But they have a little bit of that kind of richness and character to them while still being really fresh and coastal. And I think they made for a really lovely batch of whiskey, which I hope you agree. Elements of Islay, we've been bottling since at least, there's a little bit of debate. 2008, I'm going to say 2008 because that's the first record I can find that's actually selling any. They're small batch bottlings. They started off as small batch bottlings of single malt. And the whole idea was that Sekinder believed, and I kind of agree with him, whiskey's about drinking, right? It's about the experience of drinking it. You should buy a whiskey because it tastes nice. You shouldn't buy it because the distillery is really good, or the vintage is my vintage, or it's old, or it's black. All these reasons are rubbish because there's a good chance they'll still taste terrible. You should buy a whiskey because it tastes good. So what he did originally was he put together these batches of whiskey, which he would get someone to sign the side of the label and say it's good. The first batch was signed by Charlie McLean. I can't remember all the signatures, but you can find them on our website. And the idea was that was kind of giving us credibility, saying, look, this guy's tried it, says it's good, you should buy it. He also didn't want to put the distillery name. That was mainly because we owned a load of stock from a distillery, their name, Lagavulin. And so he came up with this way of describing it without upsetting any marketing departments. So the letters on the bottle, the CL represents the distillery, so CL Caol Ila, and then the number is the batch number. There's no age on this. Times are changing. When he released these originally, there wasn't as much concern, we'll say, about non-age statement whiskies. I believe a lot of the concern about non-age statement whiskey has come from the fact that there's been a lot of crap non-age statement whiskey. Because this is online and global, I probably should not say which ones I think are crap. But most of you will figure out which ones I think are crap because you'll probably agree with me. What we've since done is we've started adding the details to our website, and if you ask us or we do a tasting, we kind of give you the information so you can have a look at it for those people that are interested. But what I want to stress is just because something's young or something's old doesn't make it bad or good, right? It either tastes good or it doesn't, and it is that simple. Nowadays, we put on the approved by, it's approved by me. That originally was a mistake. It was because I didn't really understand that I had to send the samples before I bottled them. In the end, it's because it's easier. But if you want to approve a batch of Elements of Islay, give me a call. I'm more than happy to hand it over to pretty much anyone. This particular batch, so the two sherry butts of Caol Ila, obviously we sit on lots of Caol Ila, and it's one of my favourite makes, so it's always something nice to add in for Elements of Islay. And I also think it's nice to share something that's quite light in colour, but also has that kind of slight richness that you'd expect from sherry butts. Anyway, let's give it a go. Now, there is kind of a density to this that I don't think is... So, for me, what's coming through, I don't think it's massively imposing. If I'm a bit quieter, it's because my son has gone to sleep. So I realise my wife will probably turn up any minute and say, shut up, he's going to wake up, and then he'll want to come up here and talk to everyone about the last whiskey. This particular batch of whiskey we didn't add any water to, so please do feel free to add water to it and give it a go. I sometimes feel that Caol Ila works particularly well. It becomes a lot sweeter with water, so I'm certainly going to try it. So, any questions? I'm not going to go on YouTube, just so you don't get echo. No questions. All right, so we're all happily mellow. Good, I like that. Brilliant. Other bits on elements of Islay. Okay, so I'll just touch on. Everyone is speechless. It's like all the other masterclasses I've ever done. One of my favourite all-time stories is a Mark Watt story of a tasting in Japan or Taiwan, where his translator told everyone to laugh at all his jokes, and I kind of feel that's how this is. I had a similar experience in Taiwan last year. The only difference was I knew my translator, and he's my importer. He's a lovely guy, Jamie. And we did this tasting, and I said something completely inappropriate. I won't repeat it, mainly because I can't remember it. And what he said to them was very short in comparison to what I said. And I turned to him and said, Jamie, you didn't repeat what I just said. And he goes, no, I did not. I will not repeat that. And half the audience burst out laughing, which meant that half of them understood it anyway. And I feel that's kind of what YouTube is like. It's like having a translator who refuses to translate your stuff. My wife has said that she's really sad that she's had to keep the child happy and not watching this tasting. That's good, isn't it? Grand. Okay, so Elements of Islay. Last bits on Elements of Islay. If you ever see it, we also do a batch called Pete. I'm throwing this in for the marketing people who are obviously watching at home. It's our blended malt. It's our kind of standard whiskey. It's basically, I say standard, we do two. We do one at 59.3% because that's what everyone drinks every day. And it's a blended malt. It's mainly Caol Ila with a bit of Lagavulin. I'm not allowed to say any of that, so please forget it. And we did that just so we'd have some regular whiskey. The biggest problem with Elements of Islay is the batches keep getting smaller and there keeps being fewer of them because it's more and more difficult to buy Islay whiskey. There are a growing number of distilleries in Islay, including hopefully our own, maybe one day. And most of them have really successful single malt whiskey brands, and they don't want to sell their single malt to anyone, which is very understandable. But very sad for me as an Islay fan who wants to bottle Islay whiskey. Right, I'm going to very quickly search for something so I can share it with you. Right, now, the last whiskey, make sure you've had a big glass of water, make sure you've rinsed your palate, because the last whiskey is not smoky, which is probably the wrong way to do all this. If you kept some Clynelish, drink that now, because that's what I intend to do. Clynelish, great palate cleanser. Now, because we're doing this tasting online because of coronavirus, which you guys are all aware of, because frankly, we all live in the world, and most people have turned on the news. We're all in lockdown, sitting in our houses. Most people on here, I imagine, are whiskey fans who spend, like me, most of their income on bottles of whiskey. We are, at the end of the day, incredibly privileged, even if you don't feel it, which I often don't. You know, every night I sit down with my wife. We have a lovely house. We live in an okay part of the world. We've got a garden. We get to go out. And every night I sit down and I have a dram and a beer. I'm afraid at the moment I'm mainly drinking Belgian beer. Apologies for that. And it occurred to me that this tasting, which has very kindly been put together by the guys at Whiskybase, and a lot of the stock was provided by the guys at Brez and Dimmer. So Hans and Alka put their hand in the pocket for their whiskies. We sent some whiskies in. I wanted to give you something to try as well. I wanted to give you something that you could really enjoy in your home that you wouldn't normally get. But I also wanted to ask you guys to put your hand in your pocket as well. So Elixir Distillers, we've decided to support the WHO. So for those that don't know, the WHO is the World Health Organization. They're basically coordinating everything in terms of getting people healthy, and they give an awful lot of money and support, particularly to countries who don't have it. Now, most of the people on here on Whiskybase, I imagine, are in countries that are pretty well supported. If you like the UK, we've got loads of resource. There are a lot of newspapers seem to lie about that. So if you've got some time, go look up the WHO website. You can donate, sadly it's in dollars, but you can donate like $25. Donate whatever you think this last dram is worth to you. If you don't feel it's worth anything, that's absolutely fine too. And if you don't have the money, that's absolutely fine too. But I encourage you just to give a bit of money to the WHO. All in a sale and charity. It's really easy to do, but sadly I can't share it on here. So the last dram, which I selected and sent over for you guys, and if you've got in your glass, like I will shortly have, is incredibly fruity. And it is definitely a moment in time. So, here we go. The last dram is Askaig 45-year-old. So, Askaig 45 was bottled in 2015. It is Bunnahabhain. It's 1968 Bunnahabhain. For those whiskey geeks of the audience, these are sister casks to Old Acquaintance, a very famous bottling by Bunnahabhain, Red Label, 1968, all festival sherry butts. These were all refill sherry butts. My boss bought them because they're the same distillation date, and he thought that was really interesting. He bought 5 of them. It was distilled in Hogmanay, just reading from the old cheat sheet at the top there. And it was basically 5 sherry butts that were running very, very low in terms of ABV and quantity of liquid by the time we finished with them. We re-racked, so we blended all 5 together and we recast them into 3 of the butts. So we literally lost 2 full butts of liquid in the maturation of this whiskey. The strength is cask strength at 40.8%. And the thing I love about this is it properly captures a moment in time. So things you need to bear in mind. Bunnahabhain stopped peating malt around 1960. They stopped their floor malting around 1960. So this is all mainland malt. They bought this from a mainland maltster. Portella maltings doesn't open to the 1970s. Distillers yeast, which is the yeast strain that most distilleries use that, and then a mixture of different types of distillers yeast, wasn't created till 1974. So this would have been some kind of proprietary old-fashioned brewer's yeast, probably transported in wood, and it probably died in transit. So one of my favourite new distilleries is Dornoch, and I was speaking to Phil and Simon recently about this, and they actually use brewer's yeast, particularly brewer's yeast with lots of dead yeast in it, because they feel it makes for better wash. That means that you end up with much lower gravities, so less alcohol, much longer fermentations, fruitier beers, so fruitier whiskies. And the distillation time was probably longer, mainly because the fuel sources were less consistent. So you end up with these much slower distillates. Everything's slower. And frankly, the whiskey feels slower. To me, this whiskey feels like a whiskey from the 60s. It feels soft, it feels fruity, it feels rich. And it feels like whiskey that was made in the 60s in a way that people lived in the 60s, a slightly slower pace of life. So guys, please enjoy this last dram. If there are any questions about this, please feel free to ask. In terms of purchasing, just so you guys know, we bought this a long time ago. Skinner bought this stock a long time ago when it was frankly easy to buy this stock, and we were very lucky to have it. We bottled all of the casks we had in one batch, so we got 1,200 bottles. And we decided to sit on this stock and we'll just manage selling it for the rest of time, hopefully. It's one of my all-time favourite whiskies. I'm obviously biased, but I really hope you enjoy it. I hope you've had a good tasting and I've not dragged on too long. Okay, guys, so thank you very much. Dirk, any questions? Unless it's what that picture is, I can tell you. No? Oh. So Dirk says, just so you're all clear, no questions yet. I have to say the whiskey is great. Well, look, it takes a long time to drink this whiskey, in my opinion. It's the kind of dram you can nurse for a quite long time. And I think it's getting better in the bottle. So it's really nice to try it again every year. We got a review on Whiskey Fun, I think, last year when we released it in the States. One thing Serge said was, it's better than it was. I don't know if that's bottle aging. Definitely bottle aging. It's just resting really well. So if anybody wants to buy a bottle and just sit on it for 10 years, it's going to taste even better in 10 years' time. Anyway. Right, I can finally relax. I've done my tasting. Happy days. Great surprise. Well, thank you, Addy. That's it's nice that it was a great surprise. Originally, I toyed with the idea of going into the office and making you something, and then I. Cool. Okay, guys. So look, it's 5 to 8. My wife is almost certainly sitting downstairs laughing at me. I am going to go and have dinner. You're not going to join me for that. I will read all these lovely comments later. Please attend more Whiskybase tastings. If anyone wants to do anything else with Elixir Distillers, let me know. Let Dirk know. I'm more than happy to put together a whole new lineup with them and do more stuff. This was quite good fun, speaking for an hour and a half at myself. Turns out it's not as bad attending one of my tastings as I thought. And if, when lockdown is done, any of you are ever in London, please drop Elixir Distillers a line. Let me know. Come to our office. I will drink and we will be merry. Okay. So, Dirk, if you're all right, I'm going to stop streaming. Is that okay? You let me know. Otherwise, you just have to sit and watch me drink. Or have dinner. One of the two. Cool. I'm going to stop streaming. Good night, everybody. Have a great